Loving, caring people. They love life. They love being around people who love them. They always had good times. This is the first time they went to the beach this year and they loved it. But God only knows what happened that night. Life will never be the same without Shannon, Bella, and Celeste and Nico. Had all their lives to live. They were taken by a heartless one. This is the heartless one, the evil monster, who dare you take the lives of my daughters Shannon, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. I trusted you to take care of them, not kill them. And they also trusted you. The heartless monster, and then you take them out like trash. You disgust me. They were loving and caring people. You may have taken their bodies from me, but you will never take the love they had for me. They loved us more than you will ever know, because you don't know what love is, because if you did, you would not have killed them. You monster, thought you would get away with this. I don't know how. The cameras do not lie. You carry them out like trash of the house. Yes, I seen the videotape. You buried my daughter Shannon and Nico in a shallow grave, and then you put Bella and Celeste in huge containers of crude oil. You heartless monster. You have to live with this vision every day of your life, and I hope you see that every time you close your eyes at night. Oh, I forgot. You have no heart or feelings or love. Let me tell you something. I will think of them every day of my life, and I love them every day of my life. Prison is too good for you. This is hard to say, but may God have mercy on your soul. I hope you enjoy your new life. It's nothing like the one you had out here. May the courts have no mercy on you. It's hard every day. It hurts.
The case of Chris Watts began as what appeared to be a desperate search for a missing family, but it quickly turned into one of the most disturbing true crime stories in recent history. In August 2018, his pregnant wife, Shannon Watts, and their two young daughters, Bella Watts and Celeste Watts, were reported missing from their home in Frederick, Colorado. At first, Chris appeared on television, asking for their safe return. His calm demeanor caught attention, but few could have imagined the truth that would soon be revealed. Investigators moved quickly, reviewing surveillance footage and speaking with neighbors. Within days, inconsistencies in Chris's statements began to surface. What started as a missing persons case rapidly turned into a homicide investigation. When confronted by authorities, Chris eventually confessed, but his initial version of events did not fully match the evidence. As the investigation unfolded, autopsy reports provided crucial insight into what truly happened. These medical findings helped confirm the timeline and revealed details that contradicted parts of Chris's earlier claims. The evidence showed that the crimes were not spontaneous, but deliberate and deeply calculated. The case shocked the world not only because of its brutality, but because of how ordinary everything seemed on the surface. It forced many to question how someone could hide such intentions behind a normal life. If you follow real crime stories that uncover the truth behind disturbing cases, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who wants to understand how investigations reveal what really happened. Because as more details emerged, the full story of that night became even more chilling than anyone first believed. As investigators continued building the case against Chris Watts, the focus shifted to the critical hours before his family disappeared. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera became one of the most important pieces of evidence. It showed Chris backing his truck into the driveway in the early morning hours, something he later claimed was part of his routine. But to investigators, it raised immediate suspicion. When questioned, Chris gave explanations that seemed inconsistent with what the footage revealed. He insisted he was simply loading tools for work, Yet his body language during the interview told a different story. Detectives noticed signs of nervousness and avoidance, subtle but important indicators that something was not right, as pressure matched signs of a struggle, but that absence itself became a clue. It suggested that whatever happened may have occurred quietly, or that the victims had not expected danger. During questioning, Chris eventually changed his story. In his initial confession, he claimed that an argument with Shannon Watts had escalated, leading him to act in a moment of rage. However, this version of events did not fully align with the timeline investigators were developing or the evidence they had collected. This shift in his story only deepened suspicion. Detectives began to piece together a more deliberate sequence of events, one that suggested planning rather than a sudden loss of control. If you've been following this case, this is the point where everything begins to change. Make sure to like the video, share it with someone interested in real investigations, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because as investigators uncovered more evidence, the truth behind that morning became clearer, and far more disturbing than anyone had first imagined. As the investigation intensified, detectives began focusing on where Chris Watts had gone after leaving his home that morning. GPS data from his work truck became a critical piece of evidence, placing him at a remote oil site operated by his employer. This location would soon become central to uncovering the truth. When questioned about his movements, Chris claimed he had followed his normal routine, heading straight to work. But investigators already knew more than he realized. The data showed that he had made an unusual stop, one that didn't match his typical schedule. Combined with the earlier surveillance footage, it painted a picture that was becoming increasingly difficult for him to explain. As pressure mounted, authorities conducted a search of the oil site. What they found there confirmed their worst fears. The discovery of the bodies brought a devastating end to the search and shifted the case fully into a homicide investigation. Forensic analysis at the scene and later autopsy reports provided crucial details about what had happened. The findings contradicted parts of Chris's earlier statements and reinforced the belief that the events had been carefully carried out rather than impulsive. Each piece of evidence, location data, physical findings, and inconsistencies in his story began to align into a clearer timeline. Investigators now had enough to confront him again. Faced with mounting evidence, Chris's narrative began to unravel further, revealing more about what truly happened during those critical hours. If you're following this case closely, this is where it takes an even darker turn. Make sure to like the video, share it with someone who follows real crime stories, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Because the more Chris Watts revealed, the more it became clear that the truth was far more calculated and far more chilling than anyone had initially believed. As investigators gathered more evidence, the focus turned to the medical findings that would ultimately confirm what truly happened. The autopsy reports for Shannon Watts and her daughters, Bella Watts and Celeste Watts, provided critical details that helped establish a clearer timeline. These reports were not just procedural, they became a key part of understanding the nature of the crime. According to the findings, the cause of death for Shannon was determined to be strangulation. This directly contradicted the earlier version of events given by Chris Watts, where he initially attempted to shift blame and minimize his actions. The evidence made it clear that the act was intentional and required sustained effort, reinforcing the idea that this was not a sudden or accidental incident. For his daughters, the medical examinations revealed equally heartbreaking conclusions. The findings indicated that their deaths were also deliberate, further dismantling any remaining doubts about what had occurred. These details confirmed that the crimes followed a sequence, not a single moment of uncontrolled emotion. The autopsy evidence played a crucial role in removing uncertainty. It gave investigators the ability to challenge Chris's statements with facts that could not be altered or denied. Every detail documented in those reports helped build a timeline that was consistent with the physical evidence and contradicted his earlier claims. As these findings became public, the case took on an even heavier emotional weight. It was no longer just about solving a mystery. It was about confronting the reality of what had been done. If you've been following this case, take a moment to like the video, share it, and subscribe for more real crime breakdowns. Because as the investigation moved forward, even more details would emerge. Details that would reveal just how calculated everything truly was. As the investigation progressed, attention turned to the events leading up to the murders, revealing a deeper look into the life of Chris Watts before everything unraveled. On the surface, his life appeared ordinary. A husband, a father, a man with a steady job. But beneath that image, investigators discovered details that painted a very different picture. One of the most significant revelations was his relationship with a co-worker, Nickel Kessinger. Phone records and messages showed that their relationship had become increasingly serious in the weeks before the murders. Detectives believed this relationship may have played a role in shaping his decisions, especially as he began talking about wanting a different life. Financial pressure also became part of the investigation. Records showed that Chris and Shannon Watts were dealing with debt, adding another layer of stress to their situation. While financial issues alone don't explain such a crime, investigators considered how multiple pressures, personal, emotional, and financial, might have contributed to his actions. As these details came together, a clearer picture began to form. This wasn't a sudden, unplanned act. Instead, it appeared that Chris had been thinking about changing his life long before the crimes took place. The combination of his relationship, personal frustrations, and desire for a fresh start created a motive that investigators could not ignore. For viewers, this part of the story was particularly unsettling. It showed how someone living what seemed like a normal life could be hiding intentions that no one around them fully understood. If you're following this case, make sure to like the video, share it with someone interested in real crime stories, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because the final pieces of this investigation would reveal not just what happened, but how everything was carefully carried out. As the case moved closer to resolution, investigators focused on the final sequence of events that tied everything together. By this point, the evidence against Chris Watts was overwhelming. The timeline, forensic findings, and his own changing statements had all aligned to reveal a clear and disturbing pattern. What remained was understanding exactly how everything unfolded during those final hours. Detectives reconstructed the events step by step, using phone data, surveillance footage, and Chris's own admissions. It became evident that the crimes were carried out in a controlled and deliberate manner. This wasn't an act of sudden rage. It followed a sequence that suggested planning and intent. When confronted with the full weight of the evidence, Chris eventually gave a more detailed confession. He admitted to killing Shannon Watts and later taking the lives of his daughters, Bella Watts and Celeste Watts. His account revealed chilling details about how he transported their bodies and attempted to conceal the crime at his work site. Investigators noted how his actions after the murders, returning home, speaking to the media, and maintaining a calm appearance, were all part of an effort to avoid suspicion. But the consistency of the evidence made it impossible for those efforts to succeed. For many following the case, this was the moment when the full reality became undeniable. The combination of forensic proof and confession left no room for alternative explanations. If you've stayed with this story, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who follows real investigations, and subscribe for more deep dives like this. Because even though the case was nearing its legal conclusion, the final chapter would reveal how the justice system responded, and how this story continues to leave a lasting impact. As the investigation transitioned into the legal phase, the focus turned to how the justice system would handle Chris Watts. With the confession, forensic evidence, and timeline firmly established, prosecutors had an overwhelming case. Yet the courtroom phase revealed the full gravity of the crimes and the emotional weight carried by the victim's family and the community. During the trial, every detail of the murders was scrutinized. Evidence presented included autopsy reports confirming the deliberate nature of the killings, phone records showing the planning behind the act, and testimony from law enforcement who had pieced together the events from the moment Chris returned home to the point the bodies were recovered. These elements combined to leave little doubt about his guilt. Nancy Grace highlighted in media coverage how the case exemplified the importance of thorough investigative work. From the first missing persons report to the confession and forensic confirmations, every step showed how a detailed, methodical approach could uncover the truth. Viewers following the story were reminded that even the most calculated efforts to hide a crime can unravel when evidence is properly examined. The emotional toll of the case was also evident. Family members of Shannon Watts and her daughters attended the trial, recounting the shock and grief of losing loved ones in such a violent and senseless way. Their testimonies brought a human perspective to the factual evidence, reminding everyone that behind every investigation are real lives forever changed. If you've been following this case, make sure to like the video, share it with someone interested in true crime, and subscribe so you don't miss the final chapter. Because the concluding chapter will reveal how the court sentenced Chris Watts, the legal consequences of his actions, and the ongoing impact his crimes continue to have on the family and the public.